Hey, what is up, everybody? Fight day. I love it. Fight. The only thing better than waking up in San Diego is waking up in San Diego on fight day. UFC 153. It's going down Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I believe this is the third time we have visited Brazil.
Yeah.
As you can hear that voice there, Nick is not with us today, so filling in for him is my buddy Jason. He's filled in for me a couple times, so you people are probably familiar with him, but I hope you got your big boy shirt on this week.
I do. Nick couldn't be here. He's actually in negotiations with the IRS to get his firstborn child back.
Okay, well, I guess that takes priority over what we're doing here.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Good luck there, Nick. Hope you get him back, buddy.
We are the Pound for Pound Sports. Check us out, our website. We're streaming live. If you're near a computer, pfpsports.com. UFC 153, Anderson Silva, Stephan Bonner. There's been a lot of controversy around this fight. I know you're not the biggest fan of this fight.
Right, that's true.
Seen numerous main event changes, opponent changes. Gilbert Teixeira, originally supposed to fight Rampage Jackson. Big Nog stepping in on late notice. You know, this card is really starting to shape up nice. The more and more I've seen all the pre-fight shows, I'm really starting to get into this card. Dave Herman, let me tell you something. I was watching the pre-fight show, and he said something that's going to get under the skin of a lot of people.
Is this the always dangerous Dave Herman?
Yes, the electrifying Dave Herman. But he said, we all know jiu-jitsu doesn't work. And in Brazil, I'm not sure that's probably the best way to get a fan or two out there. I mean, what do you think about a comment like that? Is he just trying to stir it up a little bit? He is a hardcore wrestler, and he honestly doesn't think that jiu-jitsu works.
Well, I don't know how much MMA he's watched by saying that, because of course it works. Now you have a lot of guys that come into the UFC and that's all they have, and for some of them it does work. I think long term you need to be more well-rounded. Now you can be an expert in jiu-jitsu and have a fabulous career, but just to say jiu-jitsu doesn't work, I think is a little bit ridiculous.
It is very ridiculous, but I think he knows how ridiculous it is when he says something like that.
He has to.
Look, I'm not the biggest straight jiu-jitsu fan. I've been open about that. I love jiu-jitsu and MMA, but it absolutely is effective. Will it be effective in that fight? We'll get into that a little bit later.
Right.
As I mentioned, Gilbert Teixeira, an up-and-coming prospect in the 205. A lot of people are loving the hype on this guy.
A lot of hype on this guy. A lot of people are, they talk about how fighters are too afraid to take fights against him and stuff. So, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, no, and like I said, he Big Nog. I don't know if you watched the weigh-ins yesterday, but two things stuck out to me like a sore thumb, and one was the borderline feminine tan that Stephan Bonner had going on. Did you notice that? So, he's obviously been running outdoors with his shirt off. Right.
And two,
Tim Tebow style.
Yeah. And with all due respect, and the second I say with all due respect, something very disrespectful is about to come out of my mouth, but Big Nog looked fat. Did you see the weigh-ins?
Yeah, I saw.
He looked, I don't know how else to put it, but he looked fat. He looked like he was carrying an extra 30 pounds. Who knows what kind of training regimen? The guy is a monster. I don't really know if that's going to affect him, during this fight. But you look at that, and I'm like, man, we're already talking about a guy who's in his mid to late 30s who looks like he's 90.
Yeah.
He's got a rib missing. It looks like he's been stabbed a few times. The guy's been hit by a truck. All kinds of stuff has happened to this guy's career. But big eye opener for me, and especially being the betting fan that I am. Not that I condone that kind of stuff.
No, not at all.
But being the betting guy that I am, I look at those lopsided odds and I'm thinking, man, I got to maybe I put a few bucks on Dave Herman in this fight.
Why not?
So, moving on, Pound for Pound Sports is brought to you by Empire Bail Bonds. If you ever find yourself in a sticky situation, give Empire Bail Bonds a try. You can visit them online, empirebailca.com. They're 7745 Elkhorn Boulevard, Suite 1. Phone number is 619-249-3825. Again, that's Empire Bail Bonds, 619-249-3825. One of the major topics in sports this week, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, what does this have to do with MMA? Matt Cassel, you saw what happened to him last week. In case you guys don't know out there, Matt Cassel is the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right, for now.
Exactly. Probably not the best quarterback in the league, but we'll let the other shows get into that. But his lineman, Eric Winston, lashed out at the Kansas City fans in the post-game interviews, and basically, calling out the fans, talking about how could you cheer when a guy got knocked out cold. And You're probably thinking, what does this have to do with MMA? I'm going to tell you, it has absolutely nothing to do with MMA. But the reason I wanted to bring it up, is because are we animals? Because isn't this not what we pay big money to watch fights? Is to see somebody get knocked out?
Well, I think you can actually bring up MMA with this, because I think it goes along with the fans that start booing when guys are out there fighting, and the fight might not be as exciting as they want. As classless as people think that cheering somebody being injured is.
Well, I don't know if classless is the right word.
I'm saying people think that. I'm not saying that. There are people that are out there like Eric Winston who talk about how classless something like this to do is. The bottom line is, if you pay to see the game or the fight or whatever, you do have the right to boo or cheer or whenever you want. I don't think you have the right to go, punch in another fan and all that type of stuff. But booing and cheering, whether other people agree with it or not, you bought that right, as a fan of that team.
The way I kind of look at it as an MMA is we're all starved for the knockout. We all love watching the knockout. And it takes me back to a main event of about a year ago now. It might have been longer. But Vitor Belfort, Anderson Silva, two of my favorite fighters. I think I was actually watching that fight with you as a cloudy memory. But yeah. When he landed that front kick to the face, I was parading around my house, like a child. I was so excited. It didn't even cross my mind, oh, man, I hope Vitor's okay.
Yeah, that's true.
That thought never even crossed my mind. I was so excited. A minute or two later, you still see a guy on the ground, and maybe he's not moving, and then you're like, oh, man, okay, maybe I should stop cheering. And I've done that. I've been to live events where, oh, man, that guy's really hurt. You stop cheering.
Right.
But would it have made any difference if they weren't in Kansas City and say the home team started cheering because their players knocked out one of the other guys? We're such big MMA fans that I love watching people get knocked out. Does that make me sick? Does that make me twisted? Does Eric Winston hate my guts because I like watching people get knocked out? Isn't that why we love the sport?
Yeah, but when you talk about, you expect people to get knocked out in MMA, you don't expect people to get knocked out in football. So when you have people cheering,
when's the last time you watched a football game? We're seeing guys get knocked out.
It doesn't happen, but you don't go in there expecting for that. Whether a guy gets knocked out or not has no bearing on the. Well, it'll affect the result, but you don't say the Chiefs lost by knockout.
Yeah, and that's a great point. But I just thought it was funny. He was such a stern reaction from a professional athlete. Listen, you chose this profession.
Exactly.
These fighters choose this profession. I don't like when people complain about the fans, and we'll get into this. There was a situation with Jon Dodson that we're going to get into later, where where he's calling out fans. And listen, these fans, Eric Winston, are the reason you got a meal ticket. You're the reason you're able to play football for a living. Those fans, whether you like them booing or don't like them booing, hey, maybe you guys shouldn't suck so bad. How about that? I understand Matt Cassel isn't trying to go out there and suck.
Right.
And I understand some of these fighters aren't trying to go out there and put on boring fights. But at the same time, it comes with the territory. You got to expect certain boos. You got to expect certain fans that have a little bit too much to drink, can't really hold their emotions. It comes with the territory. It's part of living in that big house. It's part of being famous. It's part of being an MMA fighter and an NFL star.
Right, and the ticket prices are the same whether the team's good or not. So they don't change the ticket prices if you're not winning at all. So if they're paying full price for those tickets, they expect wins.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, moving on. There was a story that came out with Jon Fitch, who is also fighting tonight. He's fighting Erick Silva. Up and coming guy. I love Erick Silva. Been on his bandwagon for a while now.
Right.
But I want to read a little story that I found. He's basically talking about the MMA pay scale, and he was quoted as saying, basically talking about his inactivity the last couple years. He goes, "I fought once and I haven't fought since. It's awful. It's a terrible mental burden, terrible physical burden, terrible financial burden." Fitch revealed when speaking to MMA Weekly Radio. "We don't make millions of dollars as it is, but if you're not fighting, you're not getting paid." I think he went on to say that about 5 times in this interview. So it's a little bit rough in the bank account. Fighters in MMA, fighters in the UFC, they get paid per fight.
Right.
Should some of these stars, should there be a change in the way some of these guys get fight? Because I agree with them. When you're training so hard at such a brutal sport, an injury could essentially just kill that year financially for you.
Right.
He goes on to say, you fight once a year, you make $60,000 for that fight, which I don't buy, by the way. I think he made more than that, and I think part of this problem was some of his irresponsibility. I don't know him as a person personally, but should the UFC start maybe talking? He goes on to mention other sports and how they have yearly contracts and this and that. Should the UFC alter the way they pay fighters? Is it the UFC's responsibility to, here's your $80,000 for the fight, do what you want with it. I mean, it's not their responsibility to tell these guys how to spend their money to go buy another house, like in Jon Fitch's case.
Well, no, not only that, but if they started doing that, what do you think kind of complaints you'd start getting from the fighters, telling them that they're trying to run my life, in the octagon and outside the octagon? The bottom line is the more you fight, the more you're going to get paid. UFC is going to make more fights for people who are exciting. And I know we talk about this guy finishes fights, this guy doesn't finish fights, and all of that type of stuff. The bottom line is, are you excited to see a Jon Fitch fight as a fan?
No, I'm not.
And you're a hardcore fan, I mean, not that you're not going to watch it, but think of the fans that are just on the edge, the fans that only are going to watch the big fights. Is anybody excited to see a Jon Fitch fight?
Well, I think there's certain people out there that probably are. I'm not one of them. But I mean, we are talking about a guy who's been at the top of the weight class for quite some time now. And you're right. He hasn't been able to push into superstardom.
Right.
And he is on the upper level of talent in the UFC. Can we agree on that?
Oh, talent, yes.
Talent, name recognition. I'm looking at some of these guys on the bottom, and they really got something to complain about with, a Jon Fitch making, say, $100,000, per fight to fight in the UFC, as opposed to one of the guys on the undercard of an FX card making $7,000-8,000. The injuries hurt them a lot more than it hurts a guy like Jon Fitch.
Sure, I'm not sure if this is just all about injuries though. I'm thinking that the UFC, if Jon Fitch walked away from the UFC right now, they would move on and they wouldn't even not that he's not a talent, not that he's not good, but it would not affect the UFC at all. Fans want to see finishes. That's just the way it is. Most fans want to see finishes. He hasn't finished a guy since 2007. 2007 was the last time Jon Fitch finished a guy. That's
a long time, and we're talking about a guy that's highly regarded as one of the best in the world.
Exactly.
But
if you're the best in the world, I know his style is not that, and he's a tough guy to finish. But you got to finish in 5 years. You tell me he hasn't fought a jabroni in 5
years. You make a great point. He also goes on in the interview to talk about, we all remember that Johnny Hendricks fight. I think he got knocked out in about 2 seconds.
Yes, yeah, 27
but
seconds.
He talks about how injured he was going into that fight, and how he should have never accepted the fight, but that he did on financial burden. He had 2 mortgages. Man, I don't know about you, but I wish I had just had one nice mortgage. But so he had 2 mortgages. He had kids on the way. Blah, blah, blah. But one thing he does say, it can go away in a flash. And I got news for you, Jon Fitch. All these professional athletes, it could go away in a flash for all of them. You play a very dangerous sport, and MMA is a sport.
Absolutely.
Whether it started out that way or not, whether it is a mainstream sport now, and it can go away in a flash. So, you may be getting that second mortgage when you couldn't really afford it. I mean, who am I to say? I think you're making a little bit more money than, and that's another thing with these MMA fighters. It's such like secret, top secret what they're making, which I agree, because you got, we talked about a couple weeks ago with a guy like Mike Tyson. As soon as they know how much you're making, all the Klingons come on.
They want secrecy for what they're making, but they still want to complain that they're not making enough. Can they really? Isn't that kind of like trying to have it both ways a little bit?
Yeah, I got a hard time believing Jon Fitch's house is a little bit bigger than mine.
Yeah.
And for a guy that, he's never had a belt, he's fought for a title, he's always been in contention, he's been one of the bigger names for a while. So I got a feeling that some of this might be a little bit of irresponsibility on his part. I don't really know the guy, like I said, but it's not the UFC's job to babysit these guys once they hand them the money.
No.
So, that being said, Jon Fitch has got a train in front of him tonight. Erick Silva, he looks like one of the next stars in 170. I'm a little afraid on that fight. I've been on the Erick Silva bandwagon for a while, but we've seen recently that the new up and coming guy has suffered defeat the last couple weeks.
Right. Well, the bottom line is Jon Fitch is a very good fighter. He's really good, and a lot of guys might not have people who are not so hardcore might not even know him just because he hasn't fought as much recently.
No.
But he's no joke. He's a good fighter.
Coming up, Anderson Silva, super fight with Jon Jones. Will that ever happen? You're listening to Pound for Pound, ESPN Radio.
And PFPsports.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Last segment, we talked about super fight between Anderson Silva and Jon Jones, if that's ever going to happen. Anderson Silva, probably my favorite current fighter that's still fighting. We have a real treat right now. Anderson Silva is the best fighter that we've ever seen in MMA. I don't think there's any arguing that. Can you agree with that?
No, yeah, I can agree with that.
So there was an article that came out talking about a Jon Jones super fight, and Anderson Silva said there's no way a super fight with Jon Jones happens. And put a little twist on that however you want. A lot of people are saying, well, yeah, Anderson Silva knows he'd get wrecked. I personally don't think that. I mean, we're talking about the most dangerous man on the planet. Let's be real here. So I don't think that's the case. I think what he was saying is there's no way that the UFC will ever put that together.
Okay.
Is that not how you see it?
No, I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I can see that.
Okay. Do you think that fight should happen?
No.
It's not time?
How old is Anderson Silva? 36?
Something like that.
How much
Late 30s?
time is there left? I want to see him finish fighting out people in his own division. I'm not a big fan of people jumping divisions anyways, especially champions, current champions fighting in other divisions. I'm not a big fan of that.
And why is that okay for a guy like Randy Couture and not Anderson Silva? Anderson Silva has very little left to prove to MMA, to the UFC. I mean, the guy hasn't lost a fight. He has very little to prove. Why can't he take fights at this point in his career that are, quote unquote interesting? We used to hear Randy Couture say that all the time. I want to take interesting fights. That's why he fought James Toney. That's why he fought Tim Sylvia. Why is that not okay?
I agree with you. I understand what you're saying. The problem is Randy Couture at the time was not a champion.
Right.
And Anderson Silva is, and I'm just talking me personally, what I like. I like to see the story arc or the arc of the, to keep continuing storylines. And when you have the champion going to another division and fighting a guy, it doesn't do anything for the 185 title. It does nothing. It puts everything on hold in his division because he's the champion. If you want to abandon the title and move up and then do that, that's one thing. But to go into the 205 division and start fighting guys when you're still the 185 champion, you put a big stop sign in the 185 division and nothing happens. No movement happens in that division while you're fighting because, you're going to fight once every 4 to 8 months in this. In the UFC, a champion like that. And so you're almost losing a whole year, in that division. And I'm not a big fan of that. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of that. Now, if they fought, I would absolutely love to see the fight, just because I think it'd be a really good fight. But, I just don't think that it does anything for the 185 division. And I don't like that.
And it's funny. And I know that's why you don't like tonight's main event. Tonight's main event, Stephan Bonner and Anderson Silva. You've said that in the past.
Right.
And Dana White actually came out and he said, every once in a while it's okay just to have a fun fight. And I agree with that.
I agree. Like when you were talking about Matt Hughes and Gracie when they fought, that was a good one because neither one of them really was going to do anything for the title anymore. So that was a really, really fun fight. Chuck Liddell against Wanderlei Silva, another good one. Although that happened too late, but at least we got to see it.
All those fights happened too late, and that's so. What you're saying is Anderson Silva needs to wait and fight all these fights too late. And so he's essentially being punished because he's been on such a dominating run and been the champion for so long.
I think
if I'm Anderson Silva, if I want to get the interesting fights, if I want to fight, if I want to go up to 205 and fight Jon Jones, if I want to go, meet at a catchweight with George St. Pierre, I can't do that because I still have the 185 belt, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I understand what the point that you're making. I understand that it's kind of not fair and it's a little bit frustrating from his perspective. I'm talking about me as a fan's perspective. I just don't like the fact that you're putting the 185 division on hold. There's nothing else that can be done with that division.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, there's not a clear-cut contender for him to fight right now. A lot of people want to argue Chris Weidman, and I will fight to the death on this one. Chris Weidman had one impressive fight. He's finishing dudes, yes. He had one good fight on the main, on a main event against a guy coming off major injury that hadn't fought in quite some time. Let's see him do it again. Why are we so quick just to throw him right up against Anderson Silva right away?
Well, one of the reasons why is because there's nobody else in the division.
That's not true. There's other contenders in that division. There's Vitor Belfort. I know he's coming off a loss, but he has put together a good streak in the 185.
But there's no clear cut. Like you had said before,
so why not have him go up and fight these super fights? Why not have him go to 205 and save a 153 card without, all the fans in the world just poo-pooing all over the idea?
I'm not trying to poo-poo on the idea. I'm saying I don't like it. I'm sure there's plenty of fans that do, and I might even be in the minority.
You are not in the minority, which is kind of what makes me, angry about the situation here. I mean, we got a guy who is clearly the best MMA fighter ever.
Clearly.
And he's stepped up to save a card that was probably on the verge of being canceled. We've seen that happen in the past. UFC 153 in Brazil, it was hinged around Jose Aldo, who is their champion, their guy. I mean, he headlined the last card there, and the fans just go crazy. When he pulled out for an injury, somebody had to step up.
Right. I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. It even makes sense. I'm just, as a fan, I just don't like it. I just don't. I don't like when you put one weight class on hold for that. I just don't.
But it's not like he passed up a title defense. It wasn't like he had Chris Weidman fight signed next month, and he stepped in to fight this. That's not the case. That's not the case. He doesn't. First off, he doesn't have a number one contender to even fight. Everybody out there can make the argument for Chris Weidman. A lot of people can make the argument for Alan Belcher. There's plenty of arguments out there. Bottom line is he doesn't have a guy that is ready to step up and fight him for the title.
I know. You're right. You're right. I just don't like it. No matter, you can say all of those things. You can make all of that sense. The bottom line is I just don't like it. I just don't. I'm sorry.
You know, and you're not alone. You're not alone. But I am right.
Of course you are.
You are right. Okay. But going back to the whole super fight thing, Anderson Silva, he's fighting Stephan Bonnar tonight, and I
wouldn't call that a super fight.
I think you're going to be a little surprised. I get nervous. When my big guys fight. Tito Ortiz, I was a mess when he used to fight.
Right.
And Anderson Silva, I'm the same way. And I think the reason I'm that way with Anderson Silva is in the back of my head, I'm thinking eventually he's got to lose. Well, eventually he is going to lose.
One thing that we need to remember is this is MMA, and these guys are. Stephan Bonnar is a professional MMA fighter, a good professional MMA fighter.
Hard guy to put away.
Yes, and you can't just say he has no chance. That's not what I'm saying at all. Of course, they fight 10 times and Anderson Silva wins 9 of them. That's what most people would think, or 8. But Stephan Bonnar has a chance because he's I hate the word a puncher's chance. He's got a chance because he's an MMA fighter, and when he throws punches, he's trying to land them, and he could land them. Something could happen.
No, this is a very tricky matchup. When I first read about it, I was like, oh man, Anderson Silva's going to run through him. The more I think about it, the more I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think he's going to win this fight. But when's the last time? It's been a while since we've seen Anderson Silva go in there and slug out a decision win. He's used to putting dudes away.
Right.
And so it's going to be an interesting fight. Stephan Bonner's a bigger guy. Stephan Bonnar. The reason I think Stephan Bonnar is such an exciting fighter, and I made this point years ago when he fought Forrest Griffin, which is no doubt about it, the most important fight in UFC history. Everybody knows that.
Right.
But the reason that fight was so good is because both those guys' defense, little suspect.
That's one of the issues he's going to have is the fact that his defense. We remember when Chris Lieben fought Anderson Silva, and we talked about maybe his defense isn't that great, but man, that guy's got an iron chin. Well, he had an iron chin all the way until he got punched in the face by Anderson Silva.
Yeah, and we've seen Anderson Silva. The thing is, maybe it's not the power. I think a lot of it's his speed, but it's the accuracy.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the accuracy. It's like a fadeaway jumper when he's falling backwards and he's able to land one right on Forrest Griffin's chin.
Yes.
And send him down. And basically, that fight, he flat out embarrassed Forrest
that was
Griffin.
embarrassing. That was embarrassing. I'm a Forrest fan, and I was absolutely embarrassed when I saw him just getting knocked all over the place.
So, yeah, but back to the whole super fight talk. One thing I don't like is we've already got Anderson Silva's next opponent lined up, which you're not going to be a fan of because it's not at the 185-pound division. And George St. Pierre is a big question mark in my opinion. George St. Pierre is got a tough opponent in Carlos Condit ahead of him.
Yes.
And yet they basically already got this super fight set up, assuming both of these guys win. And that's 2 very, very big assumptions. And I don't like to hear all that talk. If I was in charge, if I had the power to make the super fights, I would stylistically love to see Anderson Silva fight Jon Jones. Jon Jones has not had the dominating run. And I'm talking time-wise. He's been dominating, the last year, maybe 2?
Yeah.
And George St. Pierre dominated his division for years. Anderson Silva's dominated his weight class and MMA as a whole for years. So I could see why that super fight's taking place. But can we get through these next couple months and let both those guys win these fights?
Exactly. With the way injuries happen and stuff in the UFC, I'm getting real tired of people talking about 2-3 fights in the future.
Yeah.
There's way too much future matchmaking going on. And it's kind of disrespectful to the fighters that are assumed that are going to lose anyways.
Carlos Condit's like, hey, hello.
Yeah.
I'm here.
I'm supposed to show up for this fight, right?
Yeah. You guys want me to be there, right?
Right.
The judges already got this going to George St. Pierre.
Exactly.
So.
Well, we know the judges are going to be involved.
Unless Condit could catch one right on GSP's kisser, they're absolutely going to be involved.
Yeah.
So with that being said, does let's say Anderson Silva loses tonight. Let's say he gets caught. Does that hurt his legacy?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
Why?
Because I think a lot of people look at him fighting somebody who he should walk over.
But he is taking a step up in weight. He's fighting somebody at a higher weight class.
You know that, and a lot of people, some people know that, but a lot of fans aren't like you, and a lot of fans don't don't see that. Don't look at this saying it's a fight that he could lose. Everybody thinks he should walk over this guy.
Yeah, I disagree. I still think he's the best ever and will be, even if he loses his fight.
All right.
You listen to Pound for Pound on ESPN Radio coming up. The UFC stars not allowed to snowboard. ESPN Radio.
And PFPsports.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Pound for Pound. Got to fix a quick mistake I made in case you're in the slammer right now and you're trying to dial some phone number that ain't working. Empire Bail Bonds. You could reach them at 619-239-5300. Once again, Empire Bail Bonds, 619-239-5300. I do make a mistake or two in my time. But UFC, they added a dangerous activities clause to their fight agreements. My question to you is, what took them so long?
Yeah, I'm surprised that's where you went with that. I agree with you, actually. The funny thing is, it's not where if you are in the UFC you can't do any of these things. It's only when you're actually contracted for a fight.
Once you sign that fight agreement,
right,
you can't go snowboarding or cliff diving. I mean, swimming with sharks. I mean, all this stuff should have been,
training killer whales.
Yeah, I mean, well, it takes a special few to train a killer whale. But what I'm saying is, to me, all this stuff has got to be common sense, is it not? I mean, especially when you go back to just a little while ago, we were talking about Jon Fitch. I mean, this is how you're making your money. You want to get hurt snowboarding? I mean, you can't wait till after the fight?
It amazes me how people are willing to do some, some people consider some of this stuff crazy, like, bungee jumping and skydiving and stuff like that.
Walking into that cage is crazy. I got news for you.
I remember when we were involved with Adult League Baseball together, and how serious you used to take it,
I still
just as an adult league, I didn't mean used to, but I'm talking about when we were together, because I'm not involved anymore. How serious you used to take it as, and it was I don't want to say just an adult league, but it was just an adult league.
Yeah, no, it's a glorified beer league. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And these guys are professional fighters doing this for their living, and they are out there riding motorcycles without helmets,
I think this is just a quick response, and there's the UFC has suffered some serious hits and injuries. I mean, we're talking about main events, co-main events, entire cards. I mean, all this stuff getting scratched, and I think this is just a way of maybe it helps. I actually would say, I don't know the stats, but I'm going to go ahead and BS some here. Maybe 9 out of 10 of the injuries caused are training.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll tell you what, that 1 out of 10, if it's not, does this open the door for them to just say, oh, I was training?
That's a good point. Jeff Kent did that, if you remember. When Jeff Kent, when he was on the Giants, he injured himself, and he said he injured himself, not training, but he said he injured himself washing his truck, and then his neighbor came out and said, no, I saw him riding wheelies on his motorcycle, and he crashed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, one of these guys, maybe, I don't know, maybe they hit a rock when they're bungee jumping, and they just say, oh, I was getting my jits in, and somebody rolled on my leg.
That's a great point. These people are going to sign these contracts. If they do get hurt doing one of these things, they're not going to be honest.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, we don't want to certainly attack the.
Right.
Come on, what do you? All these guys are pieces of garbage.
It opens up the door for people to maybe not be honest.
It certainly does.
Let's say it that way.
And you know what? This, to me, long time coming. I'm not sure how much effect this will have on upcoming cards. I'd be willing to bet a lot of these guys aren't going out and rock climbing and cliff diving and swimming with sharks. But
you got someone like
Donald
Cerrone says, I do ride horses and stuff, and so now I won't. When I'm under contract to fight a fight, I won't do it.
I don't know if he is it horseback riding really? I mean, I'm talking like, okay, wakeboarding I get, rock climbing I get, but horseback riding? I mean, is that?
Well, that's what killed Christopher Reeve.
Oh, okay. So there's one guy. I'd be willing to bet bungee jumping and skydiving would kill a lot more than horseback riding. But we'll save that for another day. Bellator Fighting Championships. In case some of you people haven't, we always make the mistake on this show of assuming that everybody out there knows what we're talking about.
Right.
Bellator, in case you guys don't know, it's probably the UFC's biggest competition. Not much competition, in my honest opinion.
Right.
They kind of swooped over. They signed a TV deal with Spike TV, and they're working on a reality series to kind of mimic The Ultimate Fighter. They're holding open tryouts for this reality series, and my question to you is, what can Bellator do different to sway us fans of The Ultimate Fighter? I mean, what are they going to throw an alligator in the cage? What can they do different that we haven't already seen for 17 seasons now or whatever it is.
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I say this all the time, but I think that they have opportunity to get more into the training aspect of what these guys do, more into the weight cutting, more into the nutrition, more into that type of stuff, what these guys are doing, and less into the who's dropping flour. I know. You're right about that. Less on who's dropping flour and peeing in each other's fruit and all, and putting beds on top of roofs and in, that type of stuff. To me, I know I'm the minority. I said this before. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm interested in the training.
Well, aren't you just better than everybody? That means it just me hold my nose up in the air here. I mean, I love the pranks. I mean, that's my favorite part of the show.
I'm tired. It's just overdone. To me, I'm tired of it. That's the first few seasons. I thought it was funny and I laughed. I'm laughing a lot less now because everything's been done before.
Two things I think Bellator. Well, one big thing I think they have going against them is if they're going to do the fighters as coaches thing. I mean, let's be real here. The fighters that fight in Bellator are much less well known.
It's going to be tough
than the fighters that are fighting in the UFC. So they can't sell that idea. One thing they do have going from them is they're essentially going to be able to pick out of the same talent pool.
Yes.
I mean, these guys that try out for the Ultimate Fighter, if they don't make that, they'll go try out for Bellator. They're just trying to get to the next level any way they can. So it's not like UFC has the holding this big litter of talent. So that's one thing they have going for them.
Yeah.
Next story, Strikeforce. Dangerously close to shutting their doors. We've been hearing it on the forums. A lot of people are talking about Strikeforce. Basically, I think Showtime's willing to just axe that whole deal. And just recently, I think yesterday or the day before, they announced that their upcoming November card has been canceled. So that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's 2 cards in a row that have been canceled.
Yeah, they're not coming back till January now, they said.
And, we'll see.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
My question to you is, should Strikeforce be canned? Because I believe that it should. I believe that Strikeforce, the TV deal with Showtime is bad. Us people here on the West Coast, we can't even watch these cards till they start at 10.
Yeah.
If you could even make it through that entire card to see the main event at 12:30, props to you. The announce team is bad. I've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
So my question to you is, the biggest star, no question, that they have is Ronda Rousey. And as of now, women are not fighting in the UFC. Would the UFC offer a contract to a fighter like Ronda Rousey?
It's an interesting question because I think Dana is starting to turn a little bit on this. In the past, he was against women's MMA. He seems like he's turning his opinion on that a little bit. I think that there are some marketable MMA fighters in the women's division, absolutely. And I think that if they just get rid of Strikeforce and they don't bring women's MMA over to the UFC, I think that's a bad decision. What if they completely revamped it, though? What if they kind of almost turned it into like a AAA? For the UFC.
Because it's not that already.
Well, I understand what you're saying. They have a few guys that are basically carrying it, like Gilbert Melendez and stuff like that. But what if they actually just kind of almost made it like their I don't want to call it minor leagues because I think that would be very hard to fight in there, but they kind of changed the design a little bit.
They have too many fighters. They have too many avenues with the Fuel TVs and the FXs to even worry about that. They could have UFC contracted fighters essentially do that on the Fuel cards, and I disagree. I think they need to absorb the talent.
Yeah.
Guys like Gilbert Melendez, guys like Luke Rockhold, they need to go to the UFC. The big question here is Ronda Rousey, and the problem is there's just not enough women's talent currently to have a competitive weight class in UFC. And what do you have? One weight class? Do you have two? I mean, are we going to get to 15 weight classes before this is all done and turn this into boxing?
So that's
so I that's the big question mark to me. And to be quite honest with you, I bet you that's the one reason that Strikeforce is still around. I think they would have closed the doors years ago if it wasn't for some of the women talent. And there's no question that they could build a super fight with some of the upcoming her and Cyborg.
Right.
That could be a UFC caliber fight, but there's just not enough talent. Well-known talent to go around, so I do think they need to close the doors to Strikeforce.
And what do you think they do with the women? You think they just let them go?
We got a up-and-coming women's promotion,
right.
Invicta. I mean, if I'd unload the bank account to get a girl like Ronda Rousey in my promotion.
Well, not only that, but that might be able. I know that she's. We actually talked to Invicta, and one of the things that she was saying was they are actually negotiating for a TV deal.
Yeah,
trying to find one,
get it.
And that would really, really put them over the hump.
No,
I think
absolutely
if they brought somebody in like that.
They have the hundreds and thousands of people they got streaming on their website. They are absolutely going to get a TV deal.
I think the biggest mistake that Strikeforce made was that Showtime deal, to be honest with you.
It was terrible.
I think that was it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've been down on the Showtime ever since, but we saw this before with the WEC. They absorbed the WEC, and now look at we got the lighter weight classes are flourishing now.
That's true.
I think, you got your top maybe 10, 15 guys. Daniel Cormier comes to mind. You got guys that are already on their way over to the UFC. Why drag our feet?
So then maybe if they absorb it, maybe they make. I understand what you're saying with the FX shows and the Fuel TV shows and stuff. So you kind of treat those shows almost like they're like a little bit of a minor league. I don't want to call it minor league.
No,
but
that's not the right word. But aren't they kind of that already? I mean, we're not seeing big title fights and big stars on these cards.
Right.
You have. Maybe that up-and-coming guy, say Chris Weidman, fight a Mark Munoz for the main event. Maybe you have that up-and-coming guy fight Stefan Struve. We're not seeing the big dogs in there. I mean, they're saving the big dogs for pay-per-view. Let's be honest here.
Right, but let's maybe put fighters that are maybe 2 or 3 fights away from a title fight and make them the main event on the Fuel TV card or something like that.
Yeah, they could absolutely do that. But to me, the talent in Strikeforce has been dragging the feet. Luke Rockhold belongs in the UFC.
Right.
Gilbert Melendez belongs in the UFC, and these. Let's just do it. What are we waiting for?
All right, I can go with that.
Pound for pound sports. We preview UFC 153 tonight. ESPN Radio.
PFPsports.com.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for coming back. It's been a great show so far. I want to tell you about our good friends at City of Champions World Class Jiu-Jitsu and Strength and Conditioning Academy, offering group classes and private training for kids and adults of all skill levels in the college area. Come learn from a world champion at City of Champions, 6186 University Avenue at the intersection of college and university. Visit them online, www.cityofchampionsSD.com. Tonight, UFC 153, we got a recap. First off, something we started last week on this show. We're big Ultimate Fighter fans, and we're going to do our Ultimate Fighter recap. I assumed you watched the show last night.
I actually watched it this morning.
Tomato. First off, I haven't really had a chance to talk to you. It's funny. I sit next to you 9 hours a day, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about this show. But what do you think so far about the Ultimate Fighter with Team Carwin, Team Nelson? Like it? Don't like it?
I like all of them, so I don't want to say I don't like it. One of the
I know. I don't like the pranks.
One of the I already said that. I don't need to go into that anymore. One of the things that I've noticed this time is Shane Carwin isn't the coach. He's not the coach, and
He's the name.
He's the name, but he has his guys in there, and you see him out there. He's not really coaching these guys. He's training with them. He's not even cornering these guys.
Should they all do that? Should they all take that approach?
No, I don't. If you bring him in, I like the fact that he brings. I like the fact they bring their own guys in and stuff, but I want to see They say it's Shane Carwin versus Big Country. I think Shane Carwin should be at least in charge of what's going on, and it doesn't seem like he is.
Shane Carwin is a fighter. He's not a coach.
You're right, but
Roy Nelson is obviously a fighter and not a coach.
The thing about
maybe if Roy Nelson took a page out of Team Carwin's book, he wouldn't look like such a jerk job on this season.
I'll tell you what, a lot of that is editing. We've talked about that before, and they're certainly making him look a lot they're lazier. We'll use the word lazier. They don't train as hard in his camp, and they're playing that all up because he's Big Country. He's got the big belly and all of that type of stuff. But when you listen to the corners, he actually, I think, gives very good instructions. If the guys would listen, he gives very specific things that he,
you need to stay on top.
Fights.
You need to stay on top.
He's talking about,
Jason, are you kidding me?
Are you listening? He's talking about, get your leg out. You got to pummel the, specific things. And
Who doesn't say this stuff?
I don't know. I think that.
How are you trying to find a silver lining here?
Maybe
there's not one. He's a dummy. So anyway, let's get back into our. I think we're on episode 4 here. Julian, okay. We've learned to love Julian, Mohawk guy. I got a hard time believing, and I'm just going to call this like I see it. If it's not for the Mohawk, if it's not for the attitude, Julian is even on this season. They're looking for ratings. He's one of those guys that drive the ratings. The guy. You know what? I'm so tired. I'm so fed up and tired with, I got kids. I got a wife. You got kids. Everybody's got a kid. Right. I got a kid. You got a kid. My buddy's got kids. Everybody has kids. Can we quit playing that card? It's getting so tired.
I am 100% on board with what you're saying there.
Anyway, so Julian, Red Mohawk guy, he starts ranting. He's going to show you how badass he is. He's going to break a beer bottle over the counter. And starts getting in one of the guy's face. It's funny. You probably don't like this because I know you're kind of a bit of a snob, but he didn't appreciate the fact that he got his. I don't even remember the dude, but the dude farted in his face, basically. He didn't. Was like holding his head down and say, "Here, let me fart in your face." But he farted in his area and kind of blew it to his face. I thought it was hilarious. Julian, who I'm sure has never done anything immature like that,
right?
didn't like it, and he's looking for a reason to get off this show. And it's so funny because just 1 week ago he's talking about he's got a better life for his kids, and I'm thinking your kids are going to see you acting like a jackass on here, and I got a hard time believing there's not 50 more qualified MMA fighters than Julian, but he looks the part and he acts the part.
One thing that I knew was going to happen is when he did lose, because he seemed like the type of guy that was going to lose pretty early, he was going to just cause trouble, and he was not going to be a team guy. He was not going to be there, I'm here for the training. He's just going to be a mess, and he's going to just cause trouble. Now he's trying to get in somebody else's face, trying to get him to throw punches, because basically, hey, it's done for me. Why don't I ruin it for everybody else? I'm just not a big fan of that.
So anyway, let me wrap this up here. The Ultimate Fighter recap. Some of the guys on Team Nelson, they started questioning that they're not training hard enough. Who am I to say they aren't? But they obviously know that, hey, we're not even doing 2 days here. I mean, high school football does 2 days.
Right.
So maybe I agree with that. Maybe I don't. I don't know if that's, if that's par for the course. I'd imagine it is. I mean, I hear these stories of these guys training all day and to only have one practice. Anyway, the fight pick, Team Carwin retains control. Nick Webb, who's the Alaskan that props to Nick Webb for not getting that bed down, by the way.
Yeah.
No, if you can't handle the jokes, if you can't handle the pranks, don't go on The Ultimate Fighter. Have you never seen an episode?
That's true.
What happens.
That is what happens.
That is what happens. So as much as they're trying to make that Mike Ritchie guy look like he's, the badass of the house,
Right. We've seen that in the past.
He is a great fighter. I've seen a couple of his fights, but he's a good fighter, but props to him for not getting his bed down and admitting that he did it. Loved it,
I like the fact that at least he did admit that he did it.
Yeah. And he fights Igor, the Brazilian. The fight totally ended on controversy. Definitely should have gone a third round. They said that Igor won the first round 10-8. If you haven't seen it yet, watch the fight. It is not 10-8. No. 10-8 rounds, in my mind, okay, you got a guy wobbly. You've knocked him down multiple times. I mean, it takes a lot.
He just controlled him for the whole round.
And that's exactly what he did. He had guard for, he was in his guard for 4 minutes and was unable to finish him, is the way I look at it.
Right.
So anyway, that's the Ultimate Fighter, Team Carwin, Team Nelson. It looks like early Team Carwin is the favorite to win the show.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
You got to kind of be questioning yourself if you're on Team Nelson at this point. Man, I should have waited the next season, but I mean, it is what
Maybe
it
wait
is.
For the Bellator show.
Yeah, where's Bellator? Where's that again? UFC 153, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, main event, Anderson Silva, Stephan Bonner. I just want to go over some of the fights on the main card real quick. Get your winners, get your losers.
Sure.
First up, Demian Maia, Rick Story. Who you got in that fight?
I'm going Rick Story, actually. We're still waiting to see this awesome jiu-jitsu by Demian Maia. He finished Kim really quickly from an injury, but I haven't seen the magic of Demian Maia yet, so I'm going with Rick Story.
Okay. I mean, we could get into this at a later day. I mean, recently we haven't seen it, but we have seen it.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Demian Maia, although he did win Dong Young Kim, I love saying that. It's like skipping a rock. He's coming off an impressive. He did look, even though there was an injury, he looked impressive. He looked aggressive, which is what everybody's been wanting to see from Demian Maia. With that being said, wrestling versus jiu-jitsu here. I don't know what it is. In Brazil, I got Demian Maia winning this fight. I think he's going to come out with that aggressive jiu-jitsu. Rick Story's been in a bit of a decision fest, and I think Rick Story is going to be able to get a takedown, find himself on top, find himself getting submitted. I got Demian Maia.
I didn't hear anything past skipping a rock.
Next up, we have Phil Davis and Wagner Prado. I think
Wagner?
Looks like a W, sounds like a V, but one thing, this is basically the rematch. We got the first fight, the eye poke. It only lasted a couple minutes.
Right.
One thing that I took out of that fight, and I'm not changing my pick from last time I saw that fight, even though I want to. Phil Davis is a local boy. I know he listens to the show. He's a big favorite. He's the big money favorite, and he's got explosive takedowns, explosive wrestling. And one thing I took from the first fight is Wagner Prado did not look like the nerves were affecting him, which I thought they were. Was making his octagon debut. So I think he's got that a bit of an advantage. This is no longer his octagon debut.
Exactly. He got kind of a little bit of a pass.
He got a freebie. He got a little bit of a tease there. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. I think Wagner Prado has the edge on the feet. Is Phil Davis going to be able to secure that takedown and punish him? I'm not going against my original pick. I think Phil Davis wins that fight. How you got it?
Yeah, I got Phil Davis too. I think when he fought against Rashad, he looked a little bit lackluster. I thought maybe a little bit nervous. I think he's he's hungry for a victory. I think Phil Davis comes out and wins this fight.
Okay. That brings up my next fight. So we agree. Phil Davis. Jon Fitch, Erick Silva. I'm really nervous about this fight. Erick Silva's the guy to go. We're running out of time here, so I got Erick Silva to win this fight.
The only way I can see this coming down is Fitch winning by decision or a sub by Silva, and Fitch is so hard to sub. I got Fitch.
Glover Teixeira, Fabio Maldonado. It's hard for me to go against Glover Teixeira. Everybody's on that guy's jock.
I'm going for the upset, Maldonado.
Okay, Dave Herman, Big Nog. Another upset.
Always dangerous, Dave Herman.
Yeah, the exciting Dave Herman. I got Big Nog on this fight, but I tell you what, once I saw that weigh-in, it made me think I might put my cash on somebody else, but I still got Big Nog.
I have a tough time counting out Big Nog, so I'm going with him.
Anderson Silva, Stephan Bonner. Main event. I got Anderson Silva. How can I go against him?
It's tough to go against him. Not that Stephan Bonner has no chance, but he hasn't fought since November 2011. Bonner hasn't, so I'm going with Silva.
My take it to the book for all you fans that like to gamble a little bit. My picks are Erick Silva, -130. I got Diego Brando, who we didn't even talk about. He's on the undercard, -185. Demian Maia.
I'm going Rick Story at a +135 and Fabio Maldonado at a +330. Put both of those two guys on your ticket. You take home a lot of money.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back at you next week. We got to continue the show on pfpsports.com. Got all kinds of stuff we didn't get to. Check us out on our website. We'll be streaming live. See you guys next week. Cheers.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for everybody who's streaming on pfpsports.com. We just finished a radio show here on ESPN Radio. Got one of my favorite dudes in the world here, Sweats, filling in. Good job. I thought the show went good. I had a bunch of topics. I was really afraid. Nick's always here taking control of the show, and one of my biggest fears is, running out of things to talk about. Luckily, we have this live stream because I got about 5 topics we didn't even get to.
Right.
We talked about on the radio show Strikeforce, rumors of it being finished, should be finished. One thing we didn't get to talk about. George St. Pierre, everybody's favorite George St. Pierre. Everybody loves them some George St. Pierre. And I'm not trying to sit here and say the guy is not a great fighter. The guy is a phenomenal fighter. Something came out in the headlines. Take it for what you want. I'm going to read it right here. George St. Pierre. And you know what? Just to make this perfectly clear, I do get these stories off great MMA websites that I like. I'm not trying to sit here and act like I wrote them. There was a story on MMA Weekly. George St. Pierre battles back from tough times, and he quotes, "I lost love of the sport." Let me ask you a question. We're talking about GSP. This sport of MMA made you. This sport of MMA made you a rock star in Canada. You can't even walk down the streets in Canada, and yet you're going to openly come say something like that. How does that make you feel as an MMA fan in general who has shelled out tons and tons of pennies and beans to come see George St. Pierre fight?
The one thing when I heard this and read that story was it's always something with this guy, honestly. Back in the past he had to go see a sports psychologist, and he had all these physically he's good, but he has all these mental problems. I don't want to say mental problems, but he can't get over the mental obstacles to win fights. I mean, what.
It's funny because for a guy that's such a badass, and for a guy that's so skilled in mixed martial arts, he's kind of a giant P.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
For a guy that's just so good at everything. The guy's probably one of the best athletes in the world. You always millionaire.
You always point to him as like he's the first original MMA fighter who started training everything. He didn't come in as under one specific discipline and all of that type of stuff, but it always seems like there's something mental with this guy. Yeah. Something.
It's funny because he goes on to saying, "I had a lot of personal issues." Well, I got news for you, GSP. I'm gonna break into a little personal story here. I got personal issues too, homeboy, but I don't have multi-million dollars in the bank account to help me get through that.
Yes.
Okay. He goes, "I lost love for the sport. I was doing it because I had to. Jason, did he have to do anything?
You don't have to do nothing.
Not because I really wanted to." And George St. Pierre, I love you, man, but I'm really starting to go. It's starting to go down.
If
man.
It's that bad, then stop fighting.
He's a nice guy. He's a great guy. Everyone always says that, but
he's a likable guy.
He's a very, very likable guy. Probably the most likable guy in the sport. And he really carried MMA through a time where it's funny. So much emphasis is put on the Stephan Bonner, Forrest Griffin really pushing this into mainstream.
Which
it did, but in my eyes, it's been mainstream a lot longer than that. I've been a hardcore fan.
It took it to the next level, is what that fight did.
It did. So it's so funny to me to kind of bounce all that and trying to put it in order because in my mind it's always been mainstream. I've always loved it. So, but he is definitely a big part of the success the UFC has today, and it's shown by the sponsorship dollars, by the just the way that the guy sits in a crowd for UFC. They show him, and the place goes crazy. I mean, the place absolutely goes crazy.
Yes, he's definitely well loved.
So, and which he should be. He's a phenomenal fighter. And I know Nick always gets on the show and talks about how much I hate GSP. I don't hate him, but again, I'm going to repeat what I said. For a guy that's such a big badass, and he is one of the best in the world. You know, he's sometimes kind of a P.
All right.
And you know, by
certainly
P,
comes across that way.
Yeah, I think everyone out there knows what I mean by P.
I think everybody knows that.
Next story, this came up. Another story we need to get to. Jon Dodson. He's going to be challenging Mighty Mouse for the flyweight title, and well deserved. He won a number one contender fight. I can't believe we actually had a number one contender fight in the UFC. I didn't think we had those anymore. But if you remember that, we talked about Dana White and how he doesn't like when the fans boo the flyweights.
Right.
And I agree. I don't like it either, but it is what it is. Who's going to stop these guys? Right. You know, they pay the money. They can boo. They can do whatever they want.
I don't like it when they boo. I like it less when Dana White cries about them booing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It makes it even worse. But, you know, Jon Dodson goes out there and he says something that kind of stuck to me a little bit. And basically calling out the haters, saying, why don't you get in there? Why don't you step into the cage, taking that whole attitude? And we do this show in San Diego for those of you streaming, and we're huge fans of the San Diego Chargers. And we had a similar comment like that. You had mentioned it. Sean Phillips said something like that after, I think it was a playoff loss or something. I don't even remember. But
people questioning him.
People questioning him. Oh, well, if you could do a better job, get on there. I'm like, okay, is that really? If you can't handle somebody questioning you, if you're a professional athlete and you can't handle someone, look what's going on with A-Rod right now. I mean, look, this guy is on non-sports. I'm seeing him on MSN.com. Picture of A-Rod says benched. And you know what he does? He's cheering for his teammates. So as much as people out there want to hate on A-Rod, he's doing the right thing. You know, going out there and going out there and getting... A-Rod sucks. Some dummy in my headphones, I think his name is Mike, he sits over there, just said A-Rod sucks. A-Rod does not suck. He's
less good than he used to be. I wouldn't say he sucks.
Can people hear that? Hop on here, Rick. Hop on here. Let's talk about that real quick.
A-Rod used to be great.
Yes, now he used to be the best player in the game. He's getting paid because of those years. It is not A-Rod's fault that the Yankees front office is stupid.
The Yankees front office, they want to win. He can't hit. He's like 1 in 17.
It is not. So is Curtis Granderson. It is not his fault.
Although he hit a home run yesterday.
It is not his fault. Congratulations. It is not his fault the Yankees paid him all that money.
That's not what they're upset about. They benched him because he can't. Right now, he can't hit.
Sucks. He said he sucks. I bet you there's 25 other big league teams that wouldn't mind having that kind of sucky production out of their third base.
Then take him.
He's not.
What did he do this year?
You can't take him because the Yankees made a stupid contract to him.
Right. That's what the issue is.
Anyway, it has nothing to do with our MMA show. I'm sorry about that. A-Rod does not suck. He is still one of the better players in the game.
Right. Back to Jon Dodson.
Back to Jon Dodson. You can't hate on the fans. He gets on there and talk about, oh, well, why don't you get in there, this and that. Look, dude, those guys out there booing are the reason you even got a cage to fight in.
Exactly.
Those are the reasons why you could financially support your family, your kids, your kids'
We all know all the fighters love their kids.
Yeah, I mean, only fighters apparently love their kids.
Yeah.
But it just goes back to that. You can't hate on the fans. The fans are the reason you're even there in the first place.
Right.
You know, if you can't handle the criticism, go drive a truck for a living. Go schlep concrete bags for a living. You know, there's other things you could do where you probably won't get booed.
Exactly.
So that was just another story we didn't get to on our radio show.
Well, I get real tired of the fact that they say if you can't do what I do, then you're not allowed to even comment on it.
Yeah.
You know.
It's just a bad argument.
Yeah.
Next up, Daniel Cormier. Was talking a little bit of. Daniel Cormier is a very, very interesting fellow. Let me tell you something. There's what I like to call the quote-unquote hardcore fan or the underground fan, and their opinion's right. You know, they can't listen to guys like us. We're idiots.
Right.
But the big difference between this idiot and you idiot is that I have a microphone in front of me, so suck it. But they love Daniel Cormier, and you know what? Our co-host Nick here, he's starting to hop on that train, and I'm not sure if he's feeling a little pressure from our underground competition or not. But Daniel Cormier has got for a guy that is, last I checked, 0-0 in the UFC?
Yeah, that's correct. Counting this morning.
Counting this morning, he's 0-0. The UFC is still the best promotion in the world, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay. 0-0. He's 0-0 in the UFC. Do I think he can't handle some of the competition in the UFC? I absolutely do think that. He is a good fighter, but we're talking about this guy going in, and he's talking about how he would coach opposite the Ultimate Fighter and Jon Jones. First off, would the UFC even want to put Jon Jones as a coach on the Ultimate Fighter? First off, and second off, what do you think gives you the right that they would be knocking down your door to go fight Jon Jones and to coach beside him on the Ultimate Fighter? What have you done in the UFC's 205-pound division? Let me ask you, what have you done in the 205-pound division period that warrants fighting for a title right away?
Exactly. Yeah, this smells a little bit of Chael Sonnen, and I blame the UFC for this because they let Chael Sonnen talk his way into a title fight, and now everybody thinks they can do it.
Yeah.
And there is plenty of guys that are not in the UFC that would love to coach opposite Jon Jones.
Who won it?
Yeah.
Who won it? Hey, yeah. I mean, give me a break. You can head up guys like...
You get to leapfrog everybody else.
Hey, Andre Arlovsky. Hey, man, I'm a heavyweight too. I wouldn't mind coaching across him.
I bet Tim Sylvia would do it too.
Tim Sylvia would... Man, he would do that in a second.
Rico Rodriguez. There's all
kinds of guys. So what you're trying... I mean... And people are going to hate on you for that. I hope you know that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I can't believe you're comparing him to Daniel Cormier, which we are not doing. But, no. I mean, let's be real here.
We're comparing what he's doing.
It would do nothing but good for your career to get matched up against Jon Jones, period. Anyway,
sure
the funny thing about that is you go on the forums, you go on the message boards, you got nothing better to do. You can waste your time with them jerk jobs. But the funny thing about it is the overwhelming amount of them that said Daniel Cormier would absolutely smash Jon Jones. Yeah. he would smash. Pat Miletich, you know who I'm talking about, said he said he would get manhandled. He said he would manhandle Jon Jones. Nothing?
I got nothing. I have nothing to say about that.
If I was Dana, I'd almost want to put that fight on. Just to watch Jon Jones pepper his face before he could even shoot for a takedown. I mean,
Dana's a big fan of shutting mouths by doing stuff like that. That's why he brought James Toney over.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Cormier's got a bright future ahead of himself. Can we at least see him get a fight in 205 before we anoint him the guy that's going to manhandle?
Let's not crown him.
Yeah, you want to crown him? All right, another story we didn't really get to. VADA. You know what VADA is?
It's like voluntary anti-doping agency.
They're gonna do their test. I don't exactly really know what they do. I mean, who knows? But BJ Penn, Rory McDonald have agreed to have VADA testing. They've been into some of the mixed martial arts events before, and they are willing to do the TUF Finale with Shane Carwin and Roy Nelson, which I think is hilarious because Roy Nelson is all about every way he can taking shots at Shane Carwin being dirty.
Right.
And
because he's been dirty in the past.
Yeah, well, it's all. Anyway, this is what Roy Nelson had to say. This fight is going to happen, but it's going to be fair. I know Shane has never failed a drug test in his professional fighting career, and that's why as former champions, we are leaders, and it's essential that we make these stands for young athletes in our sport. We will settle our beef and squash the juice on December 15th. And it's so funny how you got one guy on one end of the spectrum, you got Roy Nelson, who is obviously... you could kind of look at him and think that he's not juicing. I could be wrong. But I assume that a guy taking a stance like that isn't juicing. And you got Shane Carwin, who's built like a brick. And there's been a little bit of sketchy past. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Maybe he took his time on the TRT. I don't know. Both guys, good fighters. Can't wait to see that fight. But his camp is like, oh, I never heard of this. Wait, hold on, what? Back up the truck. I'm doing everything by the book according to the commission, which I'm sure is very easily to. Right. Come on.
Well, one of the things that
can we talk into the microphone here?
I'm sorry.
You act professional. I know you're filling in, but
one of the things that the VADA does when you sign in for it is they can test you randomly up to from 8 weeks on up to the fight. You have to give them your schedule. They have to know where you are at all times, and they will come find you and test you randomly at any time. And with the way that the normal commission does it, there are ways around it. These people have figured out ways to game the system.
Yeah, which would be very, very hard to do if you're juicing.
Exactly.
If you got something to hide. And here's what Shane Carwin's manager had to say. The only time I've heard of VADA was when they posted their story making false and defamatory comments about Shane. They removed the article. They are a bully, not a valid independent regulatory body. why would VADA find the right to just trash Shane Carwin? Shane Carwin got dirty pictures of him.
Yeah.
Why would they need to trash a guy? You know, I just thought that. I just think this whole thing is funny, and it smells to me like you got one guy who's obviously by the book, not a big fan of the guy, and one guy who maybe not be.
Right.
Fan of the guy, fan of his fighting style. I could care less. You know, if these people are not my friends. You know, and I read this article. These people are not my friends for the most part. We have met a couple UFC fighters that are very awesome guys.
Real cool guys.
But Shane Carwin is not my friend, so I could care less if he's juicing or not. Matter of fact, I prefer it because I think he puts on better fights. You know, these baseball players. I am a humongous baseball fan. Do I care if they, you know, their life doesn't last another 5 years? You know, they're basically there for my entertainment. Are they not? They're making a lot of money for our entertainment, and
so you want to see the best you can see, no matter what.
You know what? It doesn't bother me going to baseball. I mean, everyone wants to talk about Bonds and McGuire, but what about all the pitchers juicing? You know, they're hitting these balls out juice pitchers.
That's a whole nother story.
But MMA, I think it's a bigger problem than anybody will ever want to think about or talk about, or I just think it is. Moving on to my last story we didn't get to. Jake Shields got suspended. I know I kind of threw you a curveball on this one.
That's the one that I was going to talk. You had asked me if I had anything else, and
Jake Shields got suspended for a banned substance, and the reason I want to
sleeping
talk
pills.
The reason, and that's the thing. We're not coming out saying they don't say. See, the way I look at it is, if I was, you know, me and my homeboy Nick Diaz, we wanted to go get into some jiu-jitsu practice and smoke a little weed, I would come out and say, yeah, I tested positive for marijuana. Stupid mistake. I know you little kids look up to me. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. But the fact that they're disclosing what it was makes me think it's something nasty.
Right.
You know, it's not. I mean, marijuana. To me, I mean, okay, whatever. I could look past that. I mean, it's marijuana or whatever. But to me, the fact that they're not saying what it is makes me think it's something a little bit hardcore than either marijuana or maybe it's a PED.
You got to think that Jake Shields was kind of coming up out of crossroads of his career, you know, and maybe he wanted to get that extra edge.
Not to mention he was jumping back up to 185.
Yeah.
So I just found that interesting. You know, if I was to get popped by the State Athletic Commission for a drug test, I failed it, and I knew it was something like marijuana,
right,
or something that, you know, bad. I'm not sitting here trying to condone, you know, smoking marijuana, but
right,
you know, I think people could look past that. Come on.
Nobody thinks of marijuana as a performance-enhancing drug. People think of steroids as performance-enhancing drugs.
Which is why I think he's just that's why they're not saying, you know, I mean, yeah, me and the Diaz brothers had a good night on Friday.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, it's no secret here what's going on with that camp.
Right.
So I just don't, to me, I think it's something a little more hardcore than that. Who knows? You got anything else you want to say?
No, that was actually the last thing I thought we might mention. I had forgotten. So.
Yeah, real quick, tonight's UFC, I'll redo my ticket to the book. I realized I screwed up on my ticket to the book. I got Rick Story down there, but I don't think Rick Story's going to win that fight. I got Erick Silva, Demian Maia, and Diego Brando. In case you guys care, want to make some money. I think last card I went 5-1.
What did
Pretty
they pay
good. 5-1 pays you nothing when one of those ones is on your parlay. But overall, when you're picking main cards, I thought that was pretty good. I was feeling pretty happy about myself.
Oh, you wore the belt.
I did wear the belt. Damn right, I wore the belt.
Yeah, I think I just had two. I had Rick Story at plus 135 and Fabio Maldonado, I think, with a big upset at plus 330. I don't know. I wasn't able to program those into the computer, find out what it pays, but it paid big. You put
I don't ever do that either. That's who I think's gonna win. It's gonna you put in $1, it's gonna pay you a little bit more than that. That's all I know. You know, you're gonna get some free money. Anyway, so don't forget to catch our radio show every Saturday at 9 a.m. We're on ESPN Radio 1700. You can go to our website pfpsports.com. We're constantly streaming everything. This show, our radio show. You know, we got backlogs of all of our radio shows. Check them out. Yeah. We're having a blast doing it. And I got nothing else.
Where can they follow you on
Twitter? Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter, at Darren PFP Sports. I hardly ever go on there, so you might be wasting your time, but you can follow Nick, at Nick PFP Sports. He is a Twitter whore, and
he sure is.
He's constantly giving updates off our website and stuff like that, so he unfortunately couldn't be here today, but Sweats, you did an amazing job filling in today. Appreciate it. That's it. Cheers.
Take care.